What's up guys, welcome to this review of Ford v Ferrari, also known as Le Mans 66 here in the UK. This is a film all about Ken Miles, the famous racing driver and engineer, and the story about Ford's attempts to outdo Ferrari and create a car that would win Le Mans in 1966. So, in a nutshell, what did I think of this film? I thought it was great. This is, I think, one of the best films this year. I thought it was really good, and it's 2.5 hours long. One of the few little negatives I have is that it is on the long side. It flies by. It's not slow at all. It's never boring. But sitting in a cinema for 2.5 hours, you do notice it on the backside. But I do think the film's well paced. It's constantly just building up towards the big Le Mans 66 moments. I will say, without going into spoilers, that the actual ending, once all of it's done and dusted, is a little anticlimactic. But again, that's a really minor gripe. I don't have many problems with this film at all. But the film is a mix between like a drama and a sports film. It focuses just as much on Ford and Ferrari and the sports and the cars as it does on the drama between like Ken Miles and his family and Matt Damon's character Shelby and the whole like the business side of things. So it does a good job of mixing things in there. And even if you're not a car enthusiast, if you've got no interest in this story, if you've got no interest in cars or sports or anything, I think the film does a good job at explaining what's going on and the significance of certain vehicles and the importance of like Le Mans as it is. And I think it does a good job of making it interesting for people who might not be interested in the subject matter. But one of the main things I really liked about the film is the way in which the film makes the characters incredibly likable. I don't think there's a single character in this film that I didn't like to some extent. Of course, there is like a sort of like a villainous kind of douchey character in there, but even then, he's not like a bad guy, he's just doing bad things. So all the characters well developed, really likable, particularly the main ones obviously. So Christian Bale and Matt Damon, really likable characters. Christian Bale, of course, the family man and the engineer and like the car enthusiast, the racer. The performance by Christian Bale is brilliant. He's yet again changed his body shape and size. He's lost a load of weight so he can look like Ken Miles. He's putting on a really interesting, unique accent, which really helps you just fall in love with the guy because he's comes across as really friendly and cheerful at all times. Of course, there are moments where maybe that's not quite the case, but even the supporting characters like Ray McKinnon, who was probably best known for Deadwood and Sons of Anarchy, he shows up here. He's got a big significant role. I like him a lot. He's much more like the more experienced like mechanic or engineer figure in this. So he plays kind of like a father figure of sorts to Christian Bale and Matt Damon, almost. And then you got Tracy Letts playing Mr. Ford himself, Henry Ford Jr. or Henry Ford II, whatever he's called. Great performance by him. There's a moment about, I'm going to say roughly 2/3 of the way through the film, where it turns out he's not this big, hard as nails, no compassion, like suit, essentially. There's more to his character than that. And I think that goes across the board with all the characters in the film. John Bernthald's in there as well. Usually John Bernthald, like a big tough guy, he's usually like a guy you don't want to mess with. But here he is, he's a guy in a suit. Shows he's got range, he's a good actor. So it's nice to see him play against type for a change. The only female character in the film is portrayed by Katrina Balfe from Outlander. Great performance. She plays Christian Bale's wife in this movie. I feel like she is mostly there to have some sort of female presence in there and to get a sense of what Ken Miles' more personal life is. She's kind of the core of the dramatic moments as well as the son that's there. So yeah, that I suppose is a bit of a negative, the fact that she is the only female character in this film. So yeah, but that's probably a reflection of the time period in which it's set more than what it is now, I suppose. Maybe not. But the film's really well directed. James Mangold is the director. I think he's a really underrated director as well. Obviously, probably best known now for like Logan, but he's done some really good films in the past, like 3:10 to Yuma, for example. I think he's done like Walk the Line and stuff like that as well. And yeah, well directed, well paced, well edited as well, this film. because the film is 2.5 hours long, but it never feels dragged out, it never feels slow, it's never boring. So they've really done a good job of condensing the story and just getting to the key points that you need. Nothing in there feels unnecessary, except maybe the ending a little bit, just a little. But it's set in the 60s, so the period detail is really well done. It reminded me a lot of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Even the soundtrack has some little similarities to that film. But it does a good job of setting the tone and setting the mood and the scene and the time period. All really well done across the board, I would say. It's also a gorgeous film. There's a lot of really good visuals in there. It's in sunny Los Angeles, I think it is, or California at least, something like that. I think that's where it is. It might even be Texas, I could be wrong. But it's in America, it's sunny, it's bright. So the cinematography does a good job of using lighting to his advantage, especially when it goes to Le Mans and it's a bit more dreary and you see certain night shots where it's been raining and they've got the bright light shining down and reflecting off the glistening roads and so on. But this is about Le Mans 66, so there's a big race sequence in there. There's a bunch of race sequences in the film, and I would say these are some of the best race sequences I've ever seen. They're incredible. Really, really well done. They reminded me a lot of like the pod race scene in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The use of sound design to get like the roaring of the engines, the camera angles used really do build up the tension and give a sense that there is like competition going on. There's loads of like crashes. The mix of live action and CGI is like impeccable. Like half the time I couldn't tell what was CGI and what was a real practical stunt. The race sequences, particularly towards the end, brilliant. So that's what I thought of Ford v Ferrari. I'm going to go into a few little spoilers in just a bit. So if you haven't seen the film, go watch the film, come back and watch the rest of this. If you're going to leave though, I'm Grant Burton. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant Burton. Or, most importantly, subscribe to this channel. The more subscribers I get, the more content I can make. You can also leave comments and feedback down below and let me know what you thought of Ford v Ferrari or Le Mans 66, whatever title you prefer to call it. But now it's just got one or two little things I want to talk about, and you've been warned, full spoilers. So once it's all said and done, once Le Mans 66 itself is over, it then goes into what happened afterwards a little bit. It does like a 6-month time jump and you're seeing them trying to develop a new car to take on the next Le Mans. And this is where Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, dies. It feels really anticlimactic. They could have ended it at Le Mans 66 itself and just said, right, 6 months later he died in an accident or whatever. And I think that would have been a decent ending, but instead they kept going and they showed you how he died. I say they showed you, it was off in the distance, almost like an off-screen killing, so it felt really anticlimactic. Because in a way, you see him driving a car, next thing you know, he's just not in the film anymore. And of course, there's not much of the film left, but still. And his death, they kind of make his death seem more important to the people who survive rather than to him. And they never really touch on what this means to his family or his son, and so on. Matt Damon's character is the only one who will really get a sense that he's the one that's lost something, whereas we don't really know what his wife and his son feel about it. Of course, they were kind of in a tough place, I get that, because you either end it with his death or you end it at Le Mans. Either way, it's always going to be a little anticlimactic. But it would have been a bit more of like a heroic triumph moment, I think, if it ended at Le Mans and then just told us about what happened afterwards rather than showing us. But yeah, that's all the spoilers I want to talk about. This is a great film. I do recommend it. Go watch it. One of the best films of the year. And yeah, thanks for watching.